All right, I'm live. Thank you for telling me that. I wasn't sure. Been a long weekend. Yeah, this. I'm enrolled in a course now called critical thinking, and between that and some of the glaring failures of leadership I see where I work, it's led to this interesting idea shaping up in my head. Probably a book, probably a damn good book. And I think it's about time I write one. I feel the creative juices flowing again. You know, the title kind of says it all. For religion with homework, there's a lot of dumbasses running around talking about things they think they know, as if it's an absolute. You have the David Lane type of dumbass who has the absolute rules that work in prison, kind of, but maybe not necessarily so much out here. On the flip side of the coin, you have a certain type of universalist who's just adamant that these Nazis are taking their symbols. Well, you don't own them to begin with, and that everyone they just hate because I hate those people because they hate those people and won't let them do what they want. With a small amount of thought or challenging concepts put behind that, we might be amazed at what happened. The first principle of leadership is to know yourself and seek self improvement. I would submit to you that, hands down, at face value, both schools of thought at either fringe, those individuals neither know themselves nor are they seeking improvement. More than likely, they lack the mental faculties to examine and challenge one's own preconceived notions to come at a conclusion that I'm going to give you the answer for right now. Get ready for it. It's a good one. Everybody has the right to be wrong. That goes for me as much as anybody else. And I'm going to call them a buffoon. They have the right to be wrong. Doesn't mean I need to let them sit at my table. And I think that's where the real thing comes up, because it becomes this glaring aspect of cowardice based upon an egotistical ideas and righteous indignation. That absolutely cannot be. Listen, man, nobody cares. I don't care what anybody else does. You do whatever you want to. Go have fun. If you want to, that's the way you want to do, go right ahead. Just like trans or whatever kind of weird bullshit society says we need to accept. No, I don't have to buy into whatever fantasy you're creating. Now, having said that, by the same token, who do you think you are to get incensed that I don't believe your bullshit? I see other people that try to discuss these ideas and principles of leadership, some aspect of cognitive thinking or being able to think and challenge your own beliefs. On the other hand, I see absolutely no evidence that either of these ideas has taken any kind of firm root within the school of thought that comprises what we would want to be also true. Because at the end of the day, everybody kind of wants the same thing, except for the radicals at either end of the spectrum. Their driving desire is to be right. It's to be more right than the next guy, to destroy the enemy. And it's a shame. I would disavow myself of either element. Because it is a true characteristic of the unthinking, the uninspired, and the uninitiated, the true low information individual who is substituting his ego for any kind of spiritual growth. And growth is the key thing here. At the end of the day, it's got to be the key thing. Is this allowing me to become better than I was yesterday? Is this encouraging me to accept preconceived notions? When you look at the ideas of even of Posey, of how they label and name things, it says in the Scald's Coppermall, how they do it. It outlines it real clear. It says they do it in manner, they do metaphor and meter. 3 other types of skaldic metaphor, which, thus, first, calling everything by its name. The second type is that which is called substitution. The third type of metaphor is that which is called a periphrasis. And they're employed in this manner. Suppose I take Odin or Thor or Tyr or any of the Aesir elves, and to any of them whom I mention, I add the name of a property of some other to the Aesir. I record certain works of his. Thereupon he becomes owner of the name, and not the one whose name was applied to him. So, even in our lore, there's a type of thought process that's examined that allows us to identify and embrace and celebrate certain characteristics of these deities as they become relevant to our lives. Now, the only way we can properly employ those ideas is through the cultivation of wisdom. And the cultivation of wisdom requires that we have the courage to challenge preconceived notions, that we have the courage to examine long held beliefs and see if they are truly beneficial to what we are. Can we name a deity truly and embrace it and celebrate this idea with worshipful fancy, as it were, in many cases? If the limit of our ability to understand or comprehend or give that name or identify or paraphrase is based on ideas that go no further than the boundaries of our ego, I would submit to you that such a thought process would always result in the failure of this faith to provide any kind of meaningful guidance, purpose, or direction in your life. So when I look at these extremes, I see a true form of cowardice, and that is the cowardice of the examination of self. I have some of the most challenging discussions I have with certain individuals, Everett being one of them, and several other individuals who say, wait a minute now, that's not necessarily how it is, Bryan. Oh, how so? And it's a hard thing for me to say, okay, let me take a look at that. Let me think about it. Let me process that. I got to think about this. I got to look at it. Because while I might be able to put together words in a series of sentences and paragraphs that expand and expound upon any given subject within this spirituality of Asatru, if you look at the body of work that I've produced, hopefully you will see some kind of examination of self and growth, because all of it has been a reflection of the challenges I've had to contend with, my own bad decisions, my own growth, my own development, how things are supposed to work, how things work and don't work. And I remember 2 things that stick in my mind. One came from my granny Wilton. She said, figures don't lie, but liars figure, which is the truest. You couldn't be more true in today's world. And the other one was Juanita. She said, Bryan, everybody's got the right to be wrong. She said, I'd much rather be happy than right. So, in that acceptance of her limitation, that was the limit of her development. Now, her development was quite a bit higher than most people's. Having suffered and lived and developed and gone through tough times, hard times, and made it. Lived a good, long, healthy life. Died a very happy and sober woman with having helped literally tens of thousands of alcoholics sober up and change their lives in the 30-something years she was sober. That's a big deal. That's a really big deal. I have the benefit of having that same level of influence in the over more than a decade now that I've been doing this kind of stuff. And yet the challenges remain the same. You can talk till you're blue in the face. But overcoming an ego typically requires is a very destructive act. It's a very powerful act, and it requires an enormous amount of courage because, like I've always said, you have to answer that question: what will I become if I let go of this idea or that idea? The very rudimentary characteristic of faith is the supposition that I will become more. Now, if we can't name or identify or recognize or characterize or any other kind of form of recognition we might have with these deities because our ability to name and understand them is stopped at the boundary of our own egos, how will we ever create that thought process that encourages the idea that I will become more? We never know how much a thought process wounds us or damages our future until we look back on it. And sometimes it might take decades to recognize the pattern and the pain that it causes in someone's life. I know it has for me in many cases. So, yes, basically, I'm calling both ends of the spectrum cowards because they lack the moral character to examine themselves and seek self improvement and challenge the preconceived notions they have so that they might become more. You wonder why they don't stick around? Because people recognize this is all they will ever be. Yelling in the street with dildos on their heads, talking about whatever kind of weird shit they insist that we buy into, or marching around over here, beating up Pakistani kids, talking about, well, we know more, we adopt a much stricter view of life than you do. You're not in prison. You're in the free world. You're in a world that's so free that you have the ability to change what religion you want to believe in. Unheard of in times gone past. Charlemagne's a prime example when he beheaded 4,500 Saxon nobles so that the rest of the people would convert to Christianity. That's one way to make sure you're right. Doesn't mean he's right. And in truth, it's led to more death and loss of life than almost anything except political unrest. I have read that the Muslims and Christians alike are responsible between 600 and 700 million deaths in the expansion of their faith each. 600 to 700 million. That's almost as many practitioners as they have today, each one sporting about 1 billion. Political unrest, the fells of kingdoms, new political empires, and most particularly communism, socialism, and postmodernist thought have resulted in probably 200 million in the 20th century alone. Throw in a couple of revolutions and civil wars, and the numbers become much higher. So we have a good bit of work to do. Now, I don't know how many people have the courage to embrace such ideas. Probably not many. But the Renaissance can be directly attributed to about 13 different people. The foundations of schools of thought that changed the very notion of how people should govern themselves. What a radical idea. Much of it stems from the Anglo-Saxon ideas that were the foundation of our spiritual freedom to begin with. The separation of church and state. The Gothi and the chieftain were two different roles in times gone past. The Gothi provided guidance and direction, but each man was the king in his own home and had the right to cast the runes, cast lots, and to determine how the spirituality would be benefit to his home when survival was difficult. Now it's easy and comfortable. And we can find ourselves within any kind of network, on any kind of surfer or browser or television show, to reinforce our beliefs. You get a dickhead that's got about, I don't know, 3,500 subscribers talking about, well, he's not really sure how to talk about Austria anymore because the seedy and horseshit is a complete failure. And so we'll talk about Bigfoot and aliens and other things, and the things that we're not really sure we know about. We're going to talk about them because there's no rabbit hole we can't go down now because, well, we think we've got this one covered. Not by a damn sight. So the next time you find yourself engaged in an argument with a low information individual whose sole purpose is to prove how much more right they are than the next person, what's it cost you to let that person be right? True, it's probably going to damage several other individuals for a while if they have a true calling to be here and a true understanding and a true desire and all the other things that go with this search for knowledge and understanding and the cultivation of a faith that works. They'll find their way. They'll read one of my books and it'll set them back on their heels. Radically different than anything they've read before. And every bit as valid and quite possibly the kind of level 401 course that most of them have been looking for. Now, how do I improve that? How do I make that better? How do I improve upon a body of work that's already head and shoulders above 90% of the other work? Well, I guess I better start taking a good long look at myself, huh? Maybe I need to start challenging some of the beliefs that I hold. Maybe I need to examine those thoughts and compare them against others, which I've spent over a decade doing. Granted, there's lots of people that have been doing it longer than me. Congratulations, you've been doing it wrong. See, that examination of self is a courageous endeavor to face the ugliest truths about ourselves and admit them, rectify them, and move forward, trying not to be a repeat offender. Not always the easiest thing to do, but an essential thing to do, a true thing to do. As Julian the Apostate once said, what is a God but a being that knows themselves so much more intimately than we might begin to imagine or have a handle on knowing ourselves? That statement alone gives me an inkling that if I continue to examine myself and grow, what might I become? Imagine that. Well, it certainly won't be some idiot talking about, I hate everybody because I think they hate and they should all be free, and or the white man's really a victim and you don't know it. Come on, take that shit and shove it up your ass. Take it somewhere else. Nobody wants to hear it. And anyone that says it with a straight face, I really have a hard time with that. But whatever. Everybody has a right to be wrong, don't they?